Interpreting a confidence interval is not hard, but there are many more ways to do it wrong than there are to do it right. In this video, I'd like to point out to you some of the more common errors that people fall into. Let's work on this example. A statistics student wants to estimate the proportion of North Carolina residents whose favorite flavor of ice cream is chocolate, and the 95% confidence interval is 0.231 to 0.309. And there are many. I'm going to show you a few common mistaken confidence interval interpretations. Here's one. I'm 95% confident that the true proportion of Americans whose favorite flavor of ice cream is chocolate is between 23.1% and 30.9%. The true proportion of Americans. I thought we were talking about North Carolina residents here. That's a problem. Always make sure you're talking about the correct population when you write your conclusions. Here's another one. I am 95% confident that the proportion of North Carolina residents in my sample whose favorite flavor of ice cream is chocolate is between 0.231 and 0.309. Now look, this is about the proportion in the sample whose favorite flavor of ice cream is chocolate. Okay, well, I can guarantee you that the sample proportion is in this interval, right in the middle, as a matter of fact. And anyway, this statement is about a sample proportion. The confidence interval is about a population proportion, and your interpretation should always emphasize that point. Number 3, chocolate is the favorite ice cream flavor of between 23.1% and 30.9% of North Carolina residents. I don't see anything in there in that statement about the level of confidence. They must be assuming that they're 100% confident, and you can never do that with a confidence interval and get that kind of precision. So always state your level of confidence when you write your conclusions or your interpretations. In 95% of samples of 500 North Carolina residents, the proportion whose favorite flavor of ice cream is chocolate will be between 0.231 and 0.309. Okay, again, this is about sample proportions, and that's not what confidence intervals are about. Confidence intervals are about population proportions. I always find this one amusing, especially because they're setting this up, this one randomly arrived at confidence interval. They set that up to be the standard to which 95% of the sample proportions have to conform. I don't see any reason why that should be. What would happen if we were to take a different sample and get a different interval? Would all these sample proportions have to run over to where the other one is? Number 5, there is a 95% chance that the true proportion of North Carolina residents whose favorite flavor of ice cream is chocolate is between 0.231 and 0.309. You're always taking a risk when you talk about chance in the context of a population proportion. Okay, it makes it sound like the population proportion is some kind of random variable that jumps around. Sometimes it's in the interval, 5% of the time it's out of the interval. You never know where it is. And that's not the way parameters work. Parameters are non-random. What's random is your confidence interval. You draw a random sample and you get a sample proportion that determines the center of your interval, and it also determines the margin of error in your interval. So the interval is the result of a random process. The proportion is not. So avoid any kind of talk about chance in the context of population parameters. And then number 6, I am 95% confident that the true proportion of North Carolina residents whose favorite flavor of ice cream is chocolate is between 23.1% and 30.9%. Well, let's see. This has the confidence level. This has the right parameter. It has the right population. and it has the right boundaries. Who could ask for more? In fact, this is pretty good. If you do it like this, you're going to do well. And there's one more thing. On an AP exam a few years ago, they asked about what 95% confidence meant. So if anybody asks you what it means to be 95% confident, say 95% of random samples of this size will yield an interval that contains the true proportion of North Carolina residents whose favorite flavor of ice cream is chocolate. You'll have to adapt that to whatever context you're working with, but the first half of this sentence to about here would be appropriate in just about any case when you're talking about proportions. So that's what you do. Confidence, the level of confidence is about the fraction of samples that will give you correct results. That's all it is.